We want to make sure and thank our sponsors for this season on agentic AI. Infor. Most AI can't tell the difference between a yield loss and a rounding error. Infor leads with AI built from the ground up for the food industry, from demand forecasting to shelf life to catch weights. That's precision. See how at infor.com. Welcome back to Fresh Takes on Tech. Today, I'm joined by Shauna Day. Many of you know Shauna from her work across investment banking, agtech investing, strategy, and advisory roles in food and agriculture. And she has been on the podcast before, at least once, I'm not sure, once or twice. We've had many conversations. But today, I want to talk to her from a different angle. Shauna is now the CEO of Dave Wilson Nursery, a long-standing tree nursery business serving specialty crop agriculture. So she has moved from evaluating technology and advising companies from the outside to leading modernization inside an agricultural business. That gives her a very rare perspective on what it takes to move from ag tech promise and innovation to operating reality. So Shauna, welcome back. Great to see you.
Thank you, Vonnie. Really nice to be with you. And I'm excited for this conversation. There's lots to dig into.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start with kind of short version of your story arc and your business arc from investment banking to ag tech and now the nursery. So how did that path unfold?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a recovering investment banker. So I spent the majority of my career working with emerging technology companies, a lot in mobile and wireless. And I was in London in 2014, and I started to get really interested in this intersection of technology and ag. And of course, finance. And at that time, it was the Climate Corp Monsanto transaction really kind of made a huge mark on my psyche, at least. And I started talking to my friends in Silicon Valley about that and just farming and innovation and food tech. And I decided it was time to come home to the central part of California. So I'm from Turlock, right smack dab in the middle. I'm a fourth generation now Turlock resident. And I thought I'd just stop in for a couple of months and learn a little bit more about how my friends and family were using technology on the farm and how people were kind of perceiving the opportunities in Silicon Valley. And it was very clear very quickly that there was a huge disconnect between the specialty crop sector and just the impact that technology was or was not having. There was a lot of stuff that was kind of in the back of somebody's barn that didn't really work. And just being able to speak those languages between tech and finance and agriculture became kind of something that I opened a lot of doors for me, and I could do a lot of learning. And surprisingly enough, here I am 12 years later, still in Turlock, and now I'm running one of the largest fruit and nut tree nurseries in the country, which would not have guessed that a couple of years ago. But how I got to the nursery was really as a board member. So I joined the board of directors in 2018, and I was really selected to bring kind of that innovation, finance, technology perspective onto the board. At that time, Erica Woolley, who is now the fourth generation owner of Dave Wilson, she had a really unique perspective and a lot of things that she felt like the nursery could be, and really kind of professionalizing her board of directors. And that's where I spent a good part of the 5 years prior to stepping in as CEO. And in 2023, we needed to make a management change. And I was the one person available on the board who could do it for a couple of months while we recruit a permanent CEO. And here I am 3 years later. So
That's interesting. Talk a little bit about the nursery and what the business does. And I think, a lot of people listening to this podcast are in the produce industry, but I'm not sure they really understand where a nursery like yours kind of sits into the whole supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I appreciated the importance of nurseries in the specialty crop, particularly permanent crop value chain until I was in this role. I mean, because really if you're going to try to graft your own trees in the field, grow your own rootstock, that's a tough thing to do as a farmer. So the nursery themselves, we do so much more than grow trees. I think that's probably the thing that most people think about a nursery. But when you think about a company like Dave Wilson and the role that our field representatives play in selecting and evaluating new varieties of stone fruit, almonds, all of the things that we buy in the grocery store or, your almond butter, everything that goes into selecting those varieties and helping growers make the right decisions about what varieties to plant is an art, it's a science, it takes a ton of experience. And I don't think a lot of people appreciate that that's such an important part of the work that we do at a company like Dave Wilson. And yeah, I think that's sort of the nursery today and how how the nursery has really evolved over the last 40, 50, 60, 88 years in our case. But looking forward, I think that's what really excites me about the opportunities around what it is to be a nursery and what does the nursery of the future kind of look like? How can we play more of a role and not just delivering a tree to our customers and providing them with a great quality tree and a good advisory service, and then the next 20, 25 years that's in the ground and hopefully producing a good outcome for them. But it's really, what role can the nursery play as a sort of outcome partner to those growers and helping them, and not just selecting the right tree, the right rootstock, but those first 3 years of an orchard development. So much goes into that in order to make a long-term kind of successful investment in the production stage of the orchard. And that's what gets me really excited about the opportunity at Dave Wilson's. How can we play more of a role in helping shape those early outcomes for growers with services, with value add, bundling different technologies? There's just a tremendous amount that we can do. And I think that's where I see the nursery playing a bigger role over the coming years, months, decades, in terms of helping growers with really better outcomes in those early days.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a huge decision. Like if you make the wrong decision of what you plant, then you're stuck with that forever. So it really is the most important decision.
It is, and variety selection is a huge part of that, right? Whether
Yeah.
you're a fruit grower or an almond grower. I mean, one of the things that really put Dave Wilson on the map is that we were the first nursery to commercialize a self-fertile almond almost 20 years ago. And we did that through this incredible partnership. It's a multi-generational, exclusive relationship with Zager Genetics, and they are arguably one of the most prolific fruit and nut breeders in the world. And we're so fortunate to have this partnership where we really help select and commercialize the varieties that you see in the grocery store and the supply chain. So it's just things like that. You don't really realize the role that the nursery plays in bringing that to fruition.
So I'd like to explore what you saw when you first came into the business, where the biggest opportunities were, and how you thought about moving from all these legacy systems, spreadsheets, the institutional knowledge, the way people had ever always done it. Like, how did you go from I'm walking in and this is what people have been doing probably for a long time in the same way, and then how did you think about structuring it differently and that journey?
The art of growing nursery stock is truly an art, and the experience and the wisdom and all of the knowledge, the decades and decades of just how do you bud the tree? How do you treat that tree in a very short period of time? We're trying to grow roots and we're trying to grow caliper. We're trying to grow a really nice sized tree. And it's interesting. I didn't appreciate that nurseries are kind of a mashup of row cropping and permanent cropping, right? You're growing a permanent crop, a little tree, but you're farming it like a fast turn row crop. We have fairly short cycles, and so we're just, it's constant high intensity farming, and the orchestration and again knowledge that takes. The thing that was fortunate for me is that I walked in and I said, I'm not going to tell you to grow a tree, and I'm not going to tell you to sell a tree. You guys are the experts at doing that. My job is really to look at where you have obstacles in getting that work done. And I can help sort of address some of those obstacles, remove some of those obstacles. And whether they're financial, whether they're systems, whether they're teams, whether they're communications, those are all things that I could borrow from kind of my experience. But stepping in, I've never seen anything like this. And Vonnie, as you know, I've sort of spent the last 12 years of my life in row crops and commodity crops and seafood tech and ag and livestock tech and dairy tech. And I have never seen anything as complicated as a nursery. And so that was a great challenge for me. And that happens especially in a business like Dave Wilson, because we have several very distinct go-to-markets. So we serve the home garden and kind of wholesale market for those fruit trees that you might plant in your backyard. Most likely they came from Dave Wilson. We serve what we call the enterprise customer, which is more of a vertically integrated grower, packer, shipper in the stone fruit market for the most part. And then we have more of our commercial growers who are big almond production, cherries, peaches, walnuts, etc. So first off, we have different market segments with very different needs, and how they, think about the product is very different. And then within that, our business, we have both greenhouse production and we have bare root production. So we have all of these kind of different businesses within a business, which if you're a finance person like me, I stepped in, I just wanted to dig into the numbers. And I immediately saw it was very, very hard for me to get my arms around just the numbers. Setting aside all the difficult things in the field and the farming side, which, that's a whole other ball of wax. But I think it was really, where do I focus first? It's just the business fundamentals. And so as I was trying to get information out of the systems, I just needed people for it, because the systems were so rigid and so siloed. And if you don't ask the right question the right way, you're not going to get the answer that you need. And I think that was the aha moment where I thought, all right, if I'm going to stay here and try to solve some of these challenges, we really need to look at the technology that we're using and start to evolve from the 1990s kind of very archaic system that we had been in, and creating more of a data lake. Because, again, with my technology background, although I wish I could say I had the foresight of ChatGPT and Claude in 2023, we're starting to see some of those tools. And I had seen where things were going just with machine learning and data analytics that we've talked about for a long time. And so I thought, okay, we've got to build the right data backbone in order for us to be more agile, more responsive as we see things happening either in the market or in the field. We're not very good at making decisions on the fly. We're really good at, vibe farming and making vibe decisions, but data sort of driven decision making really was limited. And that was a challenge that I felt like I was up to digging into. And so fast forward at where we are today, and we're in the late stages of getting our new ERP system up and running. And I think what was interesting for me, and I didn't appreciate what a big deal this was, but again, a lot of ag businesses, your inventory system and your finance system or sales system are very disconnected. And it's really kind of hard to, again, have those insights into where the business is going. Are we growing the right things? What are our customers doing? How are our customers evolving? And those questions were hard to answer without having a sort of comprehensive view of inventory, sales, demand, and of course the financial aspects of it. So working capital.
So did you come in and try to move all of those different divisions and different things at the same time, or did you pull one and then pull another one, or how did you, I just am feeling overwhelmed listening to you. Like, how did you come in and start?
That's a day in the life. That's exactly that. I did what nobody should do, is try to replace all of the systems or migrate. I wouldn't say replace, because we're always in this state of coming off of one system, going on to another. But I looked at the logistics systems. I looked at the sales order systems, the inventory. Part of our business, and a business of our size, it was shocking to me. But a business of our size, we were still managing one of our divisions in Excel. And you can imagine the limitations of 100 Excel spreadsheets that, 30 people are trying to manage from. And it just felt extremely urgent to get this right. And frankly, 2024, 2025, the market was in bad shape, especially in the nursery industry. It was for our customers, so therefore it was for us. And that was really an opportunity for me to say, this is the time. There's going to be no better time for us to make these really significant, really hard changes than, when we're in it, when we're going through a lot of external change. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and do it all. Did we learn lessons along the way? Of course. Would I do some things differently? Of course. But having said all that, when I look at the just the decision making and the time multiplier, I guess I would say that these systems are creating for our teams, it's incredible. I can't believe it's the same business. So it's really exciting to see how the company has evolved from a system standpoint, and then how some of these new tools are being used in the field to do better scouting, to ensure that if we need to try to push one of our products to make size, okay, we have that information a lot faster and we can do something with it. Using aerial imagery, we've identified leaks like a lot of other growers, right? Leaks in our orchards, in our mother blocks. It just the technology tools are really unlocking um, a level of business insight and efficiency that is kind of the promise that we've all been talking about.
And did you hire consultants to help you, or did you have a giant spreadsheet in your head of like how you were going to do this, or did you just dig in? I'm trying to figure out like what was the day
Um,
in the life,
pretty s-
And
yeah. So there's a whiteboard in my office that the team knows about, and I'm going to give a nod to our late great friend Rob Trice here, and we always this goes back probably 8-9 years. We talked about this kind of idea of a layer cake in terms of technology stacks, and so I painted a picture of what a nursery tech stack could look like for
Oh,
our
I love it.
organization. And it has at the bottom, it has the physical layer, right? That's your sensors, data acquisition, where we're getting all of this information. We have kind of a network layer. Like how do we continue to invest in our network, the network sort of strength and reliability. We're using things like Starlink now, just to make sure that the connectivity is good around the whole ranch, not just in certain places. We have the kind of application layer at the top, and then we have the analysis layer in the middle. And the goal was always, and the goal that I tried to explain to the team was, we really have to build this data lake, right? So we can have more. We're in nurseries, so there aren't a lot of off-the-shelf tools for nurseries. So we have to be able to build some of our own tools, but we have to do it from a data backbone that's a Microsoft backbone or AWS, or we've got to use these off-the-shelf data tools and be able to build our own applications on top of it to get done what we need to get done. So there was a lot of trial and error around how do we migrate the the really important reports that we rely on every day to get our job done. What's the migration strategy there? And I think if I zoom out, it was really, we didn't have a technology strategy, we had a data strategy. So we let the data kind of lead what we did first, how many resources we maybe put into replacing some of the things that we knew that are systems of record or mission critical to getting the job done every day. When you kind of prioritize from there. Now, implementing as many systems at once as we did is certainly not advisable, and it required me to bring in some outside help from a consulting standpoint. That was huge. Just having somebody who could chase people and say, "Did you do your validations? Have you done your training?" Communicate between the technology vendors and me and my team in terms of just keeping things on track. So it's really hard, I think, to do this without having some maybe outside help. And it could be a systems integrator. It could just be a great project manager. And I think we've realized a lot of value from really great project managers. And then the last thing is, it comes from the top, right? If you don't have a leader who's really, really committed to this and who can talk about the vision and why this is going to improve the customer experience and people's lives and how the individuals are going to fit into it and how it's going to impact everybody's day-to-day jobs. If you don't have somebody who's carrying that message at the top, it's hard to get people on board.
Yeah, I think the next thing I'm dying to dig into, I just can't imagine your first company meeting where you stood up in front and
It's
hi,
shit the cake. Yeah.
yeah, I'm your new CEO and here's the cake.
Yes.
So how did you bring people along, and how did you be that voice that you must have just continually given context, to have people feel like this is going to be worth it? And I know just myself, sometimes I don't like new tools, and I consider myself a high technology person, but I don't like new tools. What did you do? How did you do that? And what was the work like? And how did you bring people along?
There's, I think, a joke around the office about my love of PowerPoints that had never been embraced in the same way before, and visuals. Remember, I'm an investment banker, and sort of I do a lot of the market analysis things and market landscapes. So there was, again, a lot of trial and error in terms of helping people envision what we're talking about. I think the other side of that, which is an important one to remember, is we were on a version of technology, Great Plains, which had not been supported for the last 5 years. So the amount of business risk that it was creating was, a board level conversation. But within the company understood we can't, as much as we want our comfortable, familiar system of record, it's just we can't keep it forever. So there was an inherent capitulation around that. But there again, it's like being able to paint the picture of where we're going, why this is important, how it's going to allow us to improve how we interact with customers, whether it's portals that people can self-serve, whether it's better logistics tools so we can see where a truck is on the road. It's just kind of some of the basic stuff that was not a huge leap for people because they use it in their everyday life outside of the office. And so the idea that we are going to modernize our tools was not too hard to sell. It was really, what are we trying to build? Why is it as complicated as it is? And how does that impact my job? What am I going to do? How is this going to impact me? Who's going to help me figure out a new way of doing things? That took we talk about change management all the time. I never understood what it really looked like. And now I feel like I really understand what change management within an ag organization looks like. I think so. A lot of visuals, a lot of meetings, a lot of including people who it was going to impact in the design. Take design sort of centric way of a human design centric way of building the tools and configuring the tools. And I have a couple of team members who are particularly good at knowing how the end user is going to interact with something, and they're part of the building, part of the designing. So I think that those aspects were really important because, I don't know a lot of those things. I don't know how the guy in the loading dock is necessarily going to interact with a shipping request form. And okay, how's that information going to be communicated, and how are we going to ensure it's the right product? So the good thing is I had to lean on everybody. I didn't have the answers. And then those people got to be part of the design. And so then they become part of the messenger, and a lot of it was spending time with my executive team and helping them understand it, helping them buy into it, helping them lead it so that they could lead, their teams and reinforce that message with their teams. But I'll say, and this is a cliche, change happens at the speed of trust. And until people trust the new systems in their role and that this isn't going to displace them, it's not going to make their life inherently more difficult. It's hard to have that change, that mindset change happen. But it's happening, and it's a journey. There's definitely not a destination when you're implementing heavy duty new systems and just doing things differently from when people have ever seen them done before. And then you start to layer, AI into it, and you start to kind of, for some people, it creeps up on them, and suddenly they're doing business differently, and it's easier. And for others, it was really hard, and it didn't work for everybody. I mean, I'd be remiss in saying there weren't some people that didn't say, "Hey, I'm close to retirement. I think this is the time for me to retire." And that's part of the journey as well. I think the other big learning, and maybe your listeners will appreciate this, this was probably one of the hardest things that I did. But I looked at our organizational chart, and it was designed in the 80s, and it was designed to do this. And we're building this kind of data backbone, this system backbone, and we have this legacy organizational structure. And you could start to see communication breakdowns. You could just start to see dysfunction in the organization because we weren't aligning around data sets and the same information. And so I am sort of in this process of rebuilding the org chart as well, so that it really supports how the data flows, how decisions are made, how communication needs to happen. We're breaking down a lot of the silos. We're making a lot more horizontal sort of teams. And for example, we've never had an operations team before. And now we have a very robust operations team. We have a great chief operating officer, business operations, customer operations, and they're really kind of horizontal. They touch a lot of different teams because that's how the data flows. That's how the decisions are made. And it's hard to have the confidence sometimes to say, not only are we going to change the systems that you use, but how the whole reporting structure works. And that can be scary for me and for the employees, but it's just more intuitive now. We have this new system. Of course, we should have an organization that supports the system.
That makes complete sense and not obvious. That's amazing. When did that realization hit? Like when you looked at the org chart and you thought, this doesn't support where we're going.
Probably about 6 months ago. And it's a recurrent, so you start to get good at pattern recognition. I think that's one of the skills that I have just because I've seen so much. Right. In the course of 25 years, I've looked at thousands of companies. And so you start to see pattern recognition. One of the patterns is just communication challenges. And I think, and not just ag companies, this is sort of universal, but in particular in ag businesses, communication can be very challenging. And sometimes we don't have the best communicators, but they're really, really good at farming. They're really, really good at numbers, whatever it is. And so I think I started to realize a lot of the communication challenges that we were having were around like data sharing and decision making because somebody else owned the data, but the decision lives in another team. And you start to see this dysfunction and think, okay, what's at the root of this? The organizational structure, how we communicate. And then I took a step back and looked at the system that we were building and thought, this just doesn't, it's not lining up. And so I spent a lot of time with the board and, with the executive teams. Okay, how do we configure this? It's still a work in process, but it's so much more intuitive when you start to think about this is how we continue to build the company, the future of this business in a durable, in an agile, more responsive way. And I get back to why are we here? To sell high quality trees and to serve the customer. And to, doing that, how we serve the customer is changing radically, right? People want convenience. They want to be able to do things self-serve or not, or they want a lot of service. They want sort of more transparency. They want more data. They want more best practices, more information. And it was really hard to do a lot of those things with sort of rigid systems that we don't know a lot of the information, or we know the information, but we don't have access to the data that they need to make the right decision. So it's kind of customer driven. It was internally driven. And it gives you the confidence to say, okay, this is a change, but it feels like the change that we need to make.
So last question, zooming back out, given all the different roles that you've played and all the ways you've come at technology from the outside, now that you're inside, and what do you think investors and startup companies and tech minds, what do they get wrong about implementation, and what are they missing, and what do you see now that you've kind of modernized a company? What's missing in the way that we go after it?
This is my favorite question. I love this question because I've thought a lot about just this, and I've taken a deep breath and thinking about the right words to use. But having sat on the other side of the table and tried to implement a number of ag technologies, I completely understand the ag tech adoption challenges that our industry has had. And if I were to distill it to one kind of key shortcoming, missed mark, it's implementation and onboarding. It has been woeful across all of the ag tech companies, not just one, not just two, across the board. Implementation and onboarding is where I see these companies continue to fall down. And I thought a lot about this, and I was actually advising a company that I had been interacting with. And it occurred to me that not enough ag tech companies treat the onboarding, the implementation, the customer support like a product that needs features, that needs user experience, that needs, all of the things that you would design into a product. We need to treat onboarding and customer service and implementation that way. And it's like not knowing the right questions to ask, being so excited that you close the deal that you just sort of, you miss the mark at the most important stage, which is how information is shared between a grower or a farming company or an ag business, how the information is shared, what structure is it in, how difficult you're making it for your customers to get information into your systems. Just the list goes on and on. And I think the frustration that I have with it now is the number of good tools out there, AI, enabled tools to help streamline information gathering, automate the question and sort of discovery stage. Are you asking the right questions? Do you really understand how your solution fits into all of the other technologies or all of the other decision streams that a company might have? Just there's not enough attention and care given to that part of the ag tech adoption process. And I think the counterpoint to that, I would say we've also implemented horizontal tools. So Data Rails is a financial planning and analysis kind of data visualization. It's a big, beautiful spreadsheet, basically, but it's a horizontal tool across industries. It was so easy. It was so easy to connect to our systems, to share information with them. And probably because it was agnostic, it wasn't, there were a variety of reasons. And I think they actually used some AI agents to automate aspects of that, which totally makes sense to me. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice for ag tech companies, investors looking at investing in companies that serve agriculture, is how good, how much attention, and how what are some of the metrics that measure the success of that implementation, onboarding, customer success.
That's great. Thanks, Shauna. It's always great to talk to you and look forward to working with you more. And I love now you've got this whole rounded perspective that we can come ask you questions about.
Thanks, Vonnie. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.